It was a kind of suburban neighborhood you'd expect to see in a glossy real estate brochure. Perfectly trimmed hedges, pastel-color homes with symmetrical shutters, and driveways so clean they looked pressure-washed daily. Willow Creek was the kind of place where neighbors waved whether they meant it or not, and the HOA sent out newsletters with words like vibrant community spirit and strict adherence to neighborhood standards. It was also the kind of place that despised outsiders, especially outsiders who brought with them anything deemed unsightly. And nothing was more unsightly in Willow Creek than a recreational vehicle parked in full view. That was my first mistake. My name's Mike. I'm a retired firefighter, a widower, and proud owner of a 37-foot Class A motorhome named Freedom. After 30 years of responding to emergencies, I figured I'd earned the right to slow down, travel the country, and maybe park wherever I damn well pleased. I bought my house in Willow Creek with two things in mind. The quiet streets would be a nice place to rest between road trips, and the long, paved driveway could easily fit Freedom. I didn't think I needed to check with anyone about that. Boy, was I wrong. The very day the moving truck pulled out my driveway, I parked my RV in its spot and started unloading. It didn't even take 20 minutes before she appeared. She walked with the sharp precision of someone who spent a little too much time reading rule books and memorizing bylaws. Mid-50s, shoulder-length blonde hair, white linen slacks, crisp blouse tucked in just a little too tightly, and a clipboard tucked under one arm like it was a weapon. You guessed it, Karen. "Excuse me," she said, not really a question. "Are you aware of the Willow Creek HOA parking regulations?" I glanced up from the RV storage hatch and tried to be polite. "Hi, you must be a neighbor. I'm Mike." She didn't shake my hand. Instead, she squinted at the RV, then back at me, as if I were a raccoon rummaging through her trash. "RV parking is strictly prohibited in driveways overnight," she announced. "You'll need to move that vehicle to a storage facility or face daily fines." Now, I dealt with plenty of difficult people in my life, but Karen had a special energy to her, a tightly wound ball of passive aggression wrapped in HOA policy printouts. Still, I tried to be civil. I checked the bylaws online before I bought the house. I said, "It doesn't say anything about RVs for homeowners, just that they can't block sidewalks or overhang the street. I'm well within the lines." She sniffed. "The most current bylaws were updated last fall, and I suggest you familiarize yourself with them. Ignorance is a defense in this neighborhood." Then she smiled, not a kind smile, but the kind a lion might give right before it pounces. "Welcome to Willow Creek." And just like that, she pivoted on her expensive flats and marched down the sidewalk, clipboard flapping. Over the next few weeks, I learned just how much power one person with an HOA badge and a personal vendetta could wield. The first notice came the very next morning. RV violation, $100 fine. Taped right to my door in a plastic sleeve. The second came 2 days later, this time with a picture of my RV attached, like I was being tracked by some neighborhood surveillance squad. On the third violation, I noticed the fine had increased. Now it was $250. Apparently, Karen was escalating things. So I did what any reasonable person would do. I attended the next HOA meeting. It was held in the local clubhouse, a building so beige it looked allergic to excitement. The chairs were lined up in military rows, and a folding table at the front bore a large laminated sign that read, "Willow Creek Homeowners Association, working together for a beautiful tomorrow." Karen sat dead center. I raised my hand, introduced myself, and asked politely why I couldn't park my RV on my driveway, especially since it didn't block any sidewalks, was an eyesore, and was my legal property. She leaned into her microphone with the smugness of a judge sentencing a repeat offender. Section 14, subparagraph C of the revised HOA regulations clearly states that motorhomes, campers, and oversized vehicles may not be parked in view for more than 4 hours unless they are in active loading or unloading. This is to preserve the aesthetic cohesion of the community. I tried to push back, explaining I was retired, not loading or unloading, but living, that my RV was clean, well-kept, and didn't bother anyone. Karen interrupted. "You had 72 hours from move-in to comply. As of today, your fines total $950. Gasps echoed through the room, some sympathetic, most indifferent. A few looked like they were glad someone else was in the hot seat for once. After the meeting, one of the younger board members, Jason, I think his name was, pulled me aside. "She's been like this for years," he whispered. "She enforces rules that don't exist, makes up others. Nobody wants to challenge her because she threatens legal action. But she's gotten worse lately. You're not the first person she's targeted." I stared across the parking lot as Karen climbed into her luxury silver SUV, parked in the board member-only spot. "I just wanted to park my RV," I muttered. Jason patted my shoulder. "In this neighborhood, that's basically a declaration of war." The next morning, I found a fresh citation on my windshield and an anonymous note in my mailbox that read, "You should have known better. Karen always wins." But I wasn't about to roll over. If this was war, then it was time I built a battle plan. 2 weeks had passed since the HOA meeting, and my RV infraction fines had crossed $1,500. Every day, I woke up to a new notice taped to my door, like it was some kind of suburban walk of shame. Sometimes they were typed in bold, red font. Other times, they had blurry photos of my RV taken from across the street, clearly by Karen herself or one of her little clipboard-wielding disciples. But what really made my blood boil wasn't the fines. It was the smug, unmistakable sound of Karen's SUV. Every morning, at precisely 7:43 a.m., her silver luxury SUV would glide down the cul-de-sac like it owned the asphalt. She'd pull up across from my driveway, pause, and slowly, deliberately scan my home. Then she'd drive off, leaving behind an invisible trail of superiority and synthetic perfume. I started calling her the parking warden. I tried to fight back. At first, the honest way. I reread every single clause in the HOA handbook. I highlighted lines. I took photos of other neighbors' driveways, ones with boats, trailers, and even a rusted-out pickup that hadn't moved since the Bush administration. I brought it all to the next HOA meeting. Once again, Karen sat in the center, flanked by 2 board members who looked more like hostages than colleagues. I stood up, calmly laid out my case, and even offered a compromise. "What if I build a canopy?" I said, "or a screen. I can landscape around the RV so it blends in. I just don't want to pay hundreds of dollars to store it somewhere else when it fits right in my driveway." Karen didn't even blink. She adjusted her glasses, leaned into the mic, and said, "We're not here to redesign the aesthetic integrity of Willow Creek just because one person feels entitled to special treatment." There was that word again, entitled. I stared at her, trying not to lose my temper. I'm not asking for special treatment. I'm asking for consistency. Karen gave me a polite, poisonous smile. "Well then," she said, "you're welcome to pursue a variance request with the city, though I doubt it'll go far." Meeting adjourned. That night, I walked the neighborhood. I counted 11 visible violations. One guy had a trailer hitched to his truck. Another had a jet ski. There were garbage cans still on the curb from 3 days ago, but none of them got cited. Just me, because Karen wasn't the HOA. She was the HOA, at least in her mind. I considered filing a formal complaint. I even met with a real estate lawyer. But Jason, the board member who'd warned me, texted me later that night. "Don't waste your money, Mike. We've tried. She's got legal insurance through the HOA and buries everything in red tape. If you sue, you'll be the one drowning in paperwork." He was right. So I went a different route. That Sunday, Karen crossed a line. I just finished washing Freedom when I noticed her SUV parked across the street again. Engine off, windows up, just sitting there like some kind of HOA surveillance van. I ignored her and went inside. 5 minutes later, I heard the soft scrape of something against my front door. I opened it just in time to catch her speed walking away, clipboard in hand, sunglasses shielding her from consequences. On my door was a new notice. Only this time, it wasn't a fine. It was a final warning. Failure to remove your vehicle within 48 hours will result in legal escalation under community enforcement statutes. You will be responsible for all associated legal costs. I looked at the signature line. Karen, acting HOA chair, parking and appearance committee. I almost laughed. Acting chair of parking? Was that even a real thing? That's when I had a realization. Karen had made herself judge, jury, and enforcer, and she parked her own SUV directly across from my home every single day. In fact, she never parked in her own driveway. I hadn't seen her use it once. The next morning, I got up early and walked to her house. It was about 5 doors down. Her driveway was pristine, probably pressure washed weekly, but it had something interesting. A very small crack running down the center, just wide enough to let a little water pool if you overwatered the front garden. But what really caught my attention was the gradient. Her driveway sloped downward, right toward her garage. And if someone, say, a retired firefighter with experience in plumbing and DIY, knew how to redirect water, that's when it hit me. Karen had been using her driveway as a staging area. I learned later from Jason that she had a standing order from the HOA board to never use her own driveway for parking because it sloped too close to her basement entry. Apparently, during a heavy rainstorm a few years ago, water backed up into her foundation and flooded her finished basement. She never risked again. That's why she always parked across the street, near my house, where the asphalt was flat and dry. Suddenly, her obsession with my RV made perfect sense. It wasn't about the rules. It was about control and deflection. So I hatched a plan. If Karen didn't want water near her garage, I figured I'd give her a reminder of what HOA enforcement felt like from the other side. I contacted a landscaping company and asked them to quote me on a project, specifically a neighborhood water feature. Something decorative, something petty, something poetic. I wasn't going to fight her in meetings or courtrooms anymore. I was going to fight her with suburbia's deadliest weapon, spiteful compliance. The next morning, I filed a simple application with the HOA for seasonal property enhancement. I requested to install a portable above-ground pool for community recreation and beautification. And guess whose driveway I proposed to place it on? Karen's. Technically, it wasn't against any rule to submit absurd community proposals. The best part? I copied the entire board and included photographic evidence of Karen's SUV parked illegally across multiple driveways. I titled the email, Community Space Reclamation Proposal, Phase 1, Driveway Beautification. It was sarcasm at its finest, and it would only get better from here. Karen never responded to my Community Space Reclamation Proposal, but the rest of the HOA board sure did. The next day, I got a very polite, very passive-aggressive email from the official HOA secretary. While we appreciate your enthusiasm for communal improvement, the proposed usage of another homeowner's driveway falls outside the jurisdictional scope of enhancement allowances. Translation: we're not letting you turn Karen's driveway into a pool, but we're pretending to be diplomatic because you embarrass the queen. But here's the twist. That email thread now had 5 board members on it, and 3 of them added comments like, unusual, but technically within proposal rights. Given the recent enforcement unevenness, this deserves consideration. Unevenness. That word said it all. Karen had been playing HOA dictator for years, and the board was finally getting fed up, so I took it up a notch. The blueprint. I ordered a 12-foot Intex inflatable pool online. Nothing permanent, just big enough to be ridiculous. I set it up in my own driveway, directly behind my RV. I added tiki torches, rubber ducks, and a beach chair I bought for $10 at a garage sale. And then I put a big sign on it. Karen's Community Pool, courtesy of arbitrary enforcement. You couldn't miss it. People started walking by and laughing. Neighbors who had never spoken to me before gave me high fives. Even Jason, the board guy who warned me earlier, came by with a 6-pack and said, "You know this is going to drive her insane, right?" Exactly the point. The HOA meltdown. The next day, Karen stormed down the street in her signature yoga pants and clipboard, practically foaming at the mouth. She didn't even knock. She just shouted from the sidewalk, "This is harassment. This is mockery. You are violating dozens of codes." I calmly sipped from a coconut-shaped cup, leaned back in my folding chair, and asked, "Which code bans inflatable pools?" She opened her mouth, paused, then narrowed her eyes. "You're targeting me," she hissed. I smiled. "Nope, just promoting neighborhood recreation." She stormed off and sent out a full HOA-wide email blast an hour later. Subject line: urgent violation of community standards, action required. She included photos of the pool, screenshot of my RV, and bolded phrases like intimidation and threat to harmony. But she made a mistake. In her rant, she accidentally attached a private note meant for another board member, in which she said, "He's mocking me. Just wait till I get him fined into compliance. I'll make him remove that monstrosity before Sunday." That little note blew up in her face. Within 12 hours, 2 board members forwarded that email thread to everyone else, including the HOA legal review officer. That's when the board called a special emergency meeting. The HOA coup. This wasn't a standard gathering. This was a digital meeting, held over Zoom, and Karen looked like she had aged 10 years in a day. She tried to regain control, yelling about decorum and deterioration of community values. But Jason brought receipts. He shared a map of neighborhood RV violations over the past year, photos of Karen's own car parked illegally for months, her private email about finding me into compliance, and then he dropped the hammer. Jason motioned for a vote of no confidence in Karen's leadership due to selective enforcement, abuse of power, personal vendettas disguised as policy. 5 board members voted yes. Karen, red-faced and stuttering, voted no and was outvoted. Effective immediately, Karen was removed as acting chair, and as a cherry on top, the board passed a motion to pause enforcement of RV-related complaints until the community handbook could be updated. The aftermath: the next morning was unusually quiet. Karen's SUV? Gone. Her house? Curtains drawn. My inflatable pool? Still standing proudly in the driveway. I added a new sign that read, "Open to all, except HOA enforcers." Neighbors stopped by, took photos, and one even brought their toddler over for a splash. I later heard through grapevine that Karen had a stress-related incident and took a leave of absence from all HOA duties. She hasn't shown up to a meeting since. A month later, the HOA passed a new guideline. Homeowners may store personal vehicles, including RVs, in driveways so long as they are well-maintained, safely parked, and do not obstruct traffic. It was practically written with me in mind. And just like that, Freedom, my beloved RV, became the first officially approved driveway RV in the neighborhood. The final irony: last week, I received a handwritten letter. No envelope, just folded in half and tucked under my doormat. It said, "I may not agree with how you did it, but you made your point. Enjoy your pool." K. No signature, no apology, but enough to know she'd finally learned her lesson. And me? I still have that pool in the garage, deflated but ready, because you never know when the HOA might need a reminder. That petty revenge floats. The neighborhood had changed. Ever since that inflatable pool incident, Willow Creek, once a tight-lipped, perfectly manicured suburban nest, felt different, looser, livelier. People started leaving their trash bins out past pickup day. Lawn decorations got a little weirder. One guy even installed a 10-foot inflatable flamingo in his yard for no reason other than, as he told me, to test the system. But the most noticeable shift? Karen was gone. Not physically. Her house still sat 5 doors down, a monument to passive-aggressive landscaping and overly symmetrical hedges. But she was no longer the HOA tyrant she'd once been. Her silver SUV stopped doing its daily patrol. The clipboard disappeared. And the HOA meetings? They changed. The board opened a public comment period for the first time in years. They even started broadcasting meetings on Zoom, so working residents could participate without showing up in person. Something Karen had always blocked before, claiming it would invite chaos. Turns out, a little chaos was exactly what the neighborhood needed. The rise of civil disobedience, suburban style. You'd think that after Karen's fall from power, things would settle down. But if anything, her downfall had sparked something bigger, a sort of quiet uprising. One by one, neighbors began speaking out. A retired Army vet named Don finally brought up the issue of HOA fees being used to landscape Karen's personal flower bed during her tenure. Another couple revealed that Karen had once fined them for a bird feeder because it attracted non-native species. Even the sweet old woman who lived in the blue house on the corner, Mrs. Green, 78 years old and nearly deaf, came forward and told the board how Karen had threatened to have her porch swing removed for being visually chaotic. And with each story that came out, more people got emboldened. The HOA was forced to audit its own records. And guess what? Over $9,000 in fines have been inconsistently levied. The majority of them to just 4 households, all of whom had at some point disagreed with Karen at a meeting. Turns out, her HOA reign wasn't just about enforcing the rules. It was about punishing dissent. Karen tries to regain control. For a moment, it looked like Karen might attempt a comeback. One afternoon, a new flyer appeared in mailboxes across the neighborhood. It was an invite to a community standards forum, hosted not by the HOA, but by Karen herself in her backyard. She called an informal discussion space where residents could speak freely without agenda-driven leadership, an obvious jab at the current board. A few curious neighbors showed up, mostly for free lemonade and the spectacle. Karen stood beneath a canopy with printed-out binders and labeled folders, trying to give a PowerPoint presentation on restoring order. It didn't go well. Someone asked why she'd issued a fine for chalk drawings. Another asked if it was true she banned Halloween skeletons for being excessively pagan. When a teenager sarcastically asked if parking an RV was now a form of civil protest, half the crowd laughed. Karen didn't finish the presentation. She folded her laptop, muttered something about mob mentality, and stormed inside, leaving behind half a tray of untouched lemon bars and her fading authority. She never hosted another event, the RV that started a movement. It sounds silly to say now, but that one RV, parked quietly in a driveway, had sparked a full-blown cultural shift in Willow Creek. People started seeing the HOA differently, not as some elite, untouchable force, but as a collection of people who should be held accountable. The board, to their credit, got the message. They started rotating leadership positions, implemented a transparent voting process, and even held a neighborhood barbecue to reset relationships. They invited everyone, including Karen. She didn't come, but she did watch from her upstairs window the whole time. Jason swore he saw her curtain move. Me? I parked Freedom, freshly washed, freshly waxed, right on the grass beside the sidewalk for everyone to admire. It wasn't just a vehicle anymore. It was a monument to standing your ground when the rules are used as weapons. Unexpected allies. One evening, as I was coming back from a trip, I found a small envelope in my mailbox. Inside was a folded piece of paper. No name, just 2 lines written in neat cursive. I never liked her. I just never had the nerve to say it. Thanks for giving the rest of us permission. Number 12 Willow Creek. That hit harder than any courtroom one ever could. Over the next few days, more little notes trickled in, all anonymous, all grateful. One had a gift card for a car wash taped to it. Another came with a drawing of my RV by a kid down the street who labeled it the Freedom Machine. I pinned that one to the corkboard in my kitchen. Karen's final act. A month after the pool incident, Karen put up a for sale sign. No announcement, no farewell, just a sign staked into her perfectly trimmed lawn with bold red letters and a small by owner tag beneath it. Word spread fast. Some said she was moving to a gated community. Others whispered she had accepted a position with another HOA in a more structured neighborhood. No one really knew. But when the moving truck pulled up, almost no one came to say goodbye, except Jason. He handed her a potted succulent and said, "Try letting things grow without choking them next time." Karen didn't respond. She closed the truck door, climbed into the passenger seat of her beloved SUV, and disappeared down the same cul-de-sac she once ruled. Legacy of the pool. After she left, the HOA held a special vote. They passed an amendment allowing small RVs, boats, and trailers to be parked in driveways, so long as they didn't block the sidewalk or create safety hazards. It was dubbed the Freedom Clause by the neighbors. I still had the pool in my garage. And one hot summer day, I set up again, not in protest this time, but as a celebration. Kids splashed around. Neighbors brought drinks. Someone grilled hot dogs. We laughed. We talked. We lived. And right there, floating on a cheap inflatable flamingo, I realized something simple. Sometimes, the best revenge is community. The irony? It wasn't the pool. It wasn't even the RV. It was that Karen's war on personal freedom gave birth to community. For years, she'd ruled through silence and fear. Clipboard fines, snarky emails, unspoken threats disguised as concerns for aesthetics. But all it took was one man, one RV, and one inflatable pool to flip the script. A neighborhood reborn. 2 months after Karen moved out, the cul-de-sac had changed. For the better, people waved again. Barbecues became monthly. Porch lights stayed on a little longer. Kids chalked up the sidewalks without their parents fearing they'd get excessive color violations. I even helped Mr. Templeton, a 74-year-old widower, fix up his vintage Airstream. The old man had hidden it for years. Terrified Karen would report him. He parked it proudly in his driveway now, covered with a little banner that read, "Retired, not expired." The new HOA board chair, Lisa, a middle school teacher, sent out newsletters that actually made people laugh. One of them read, "New rule. If your RV has a name, you can park as long as you like, within reason. Bonus points for puns." Someone added googly eyes and a smiley face to their camper the next day. Freedom had caught on. Karen's replacement. Her house didn't stay empty for long. A young couple bought it, Amanda and Jace. Tech workers from Austin with an energetic Labrador named Pepper who liked to bark at leaves. On move-in day, I introduced myself. Amanda smiled and said, "You're the RV guy, right?" I laughed. "Depends who you ask." She grinned. We were told about the incident. Thought it was hilarious. That's partly why we bought here. Figure any place that stands up to HOA tyranny is our kind of town. We shared a beer on their porch later that week while Pepper chased squirrels in manic chaos. No clipboards in sight. One last echoed Karen. But Karen wasn't completely gone. One day, a certified letter arrived in my mailbox. No return address. Inside was a formal HOA complaint, stamped with an old date and filed a week before she was removed. It read, "Subject continues to demonstrate passive-aggressive defiance by means of decorative mockery, obstructive vehicular placement, and seasonal inflatable usage. Recommend escalation to finding committee." I laughed for a good minute, and then I did something I knew would have sent Karen over the edge. I framed it, hung it on the wall of my RV, right above the coffee machine. Now, every time I take Freedom out for a road trip, I start the engine beneath Karen's last desperate attempt at control. It's poetic, perfect, petty in all the best ways. The story that keeps spreading. Weeks later, a local podcaster covering neighborhood drama somehow heard about the pool. He reached out, asked if I'd be willing to share the story. I agreed with one condition. Keep it anonymous. Call me the guy with the pool. That episode blew up. People from across the country messaged the podcast with their own HOA horror stories. Some even started calling their own driveways Karen's pool in solidarity. The host later told me that episode got more engagement than anything we've ever done. Revenge, it turns out, resonates, especially when it's wrapped in humor and justice. One final ride. This past weekend, I took Freedom out to the coast. Just a short 3-day trip to a lakeside RV park. When I pulled in, a man 2 spaces over recognized me from the podcast story. He said, "Hey, that wasn't really your driveway, was it?" I smiled. Not legally, but symbolically, absolutely. We clinked cans of root beer and watched the sunset. And I thought about how far the neighborhood had come, about how one woman's pettiness had led to so many people standing up, about how satisfying it was to win not with violence or chaos, but with a pool, some laughter, and a whole lot of patience. The final irony. You want to know the kicker? After Karen moved out, she tried to join the HOA board of her new neighborhood. But word travels fast in the HOA underground. Within days, the new board had seen the podcast, read the emails, and politely declined her request. Apparently. Someone even printed a screenshot of the pool and taped it to their office fridge with the caption, "Beware the clipboard." As for me, I'm back home, the RV parked proudly in the driveway, and tucked in the garage, next to the spare tire and lawn chairs, sits that same inflatable pool, deflated, folded, waiting, not because I expect another battle, but because I know one thing for sure. If another Karen ever tries to rise, I'll be ready.